participate, whether or not you're on an active first team.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first robotics live stream, sponsored by WPI. If this is your first time at a stream, my name is Nick Parker. I'm a graduate student at WPI in the Interactive Media and Game Development program. I will be your host for the evening. If this is your first time on stream, we did another stream a few days ago on Sunday, I believe it was, where we talked about the beginning parts of a game jam and how you take an idea and develop it. But today, since the game jam has been going on for a couple days, today we're going to be talking about polish and how to take your currently, hopefully, mostly finished game and make it all nice and pretty. I have three new individuals with me. We'll go ahead, I'll say you guys' names, and then you can introduce yourself, and we will begin with questions. And then later on in the stream, we will take questions from chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in there. Andrew, who is also a grad student from WPI, will be taking those questions and putting them into a nice Google Doc for us to read from. But starting off, let's do introductions. First, we'll go to Michael.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Michael DeAnda. I'm a professional lecturer at DePaul University in the game design department there. And I'm a WPI alum, class of 2012 and 2013. I make games that focus on LGBTQ experience and experimental approaches to game design.
Great. Ralph.
Hi, Nick, and thank you everybody for having us. I'm Ralph. I'm a senior instructor at WPI's IMGD program, where I've been for 8 years now. And I predominantly teach digital art courses, ranging from 3D modeling to animation. And outside of teaching, I also do a lot of character modeling for games, film, as well as 3D toy and print design. So I like to stay active outside of classes. And that's me in a nutshell.
Great. And rounding us up, Kate.
Hello. Ditto what Ralph said. Thanks for having us. I'm Kate. I'm a game designer and producer, WPI alum, worked at a variety of companies in the greater Boston area. Also do other indie stuff. My most recent game was The Call of Karen, about a 1950s suburban housewife whose home was invaded by Cthulhu, with over 70,000 downloads on Steam. I have organized many game jams and participated in many more, so I'm very excited to be here today.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you guys for coming. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So like I mentioned earlier, at this point, the game jam has been going on for a couple days, so our participants are starting off on their polishing passes, most likely. So we'll just go down the list here. Same order, we'll start with Mike and end with Kate. What is your general process when it comes to polishing a project? Oh, we can't hear you, Mike.
No.
Tragic.
No.
Are you muted? It looks like there's like a little mute button like next to you. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to Ralph, and we'll get Mike's microphone fixed up.
So yeah, identifying polish and where to apply it is tough, but I think there are some points along sort of the game design process where you decide to maybe scrap ideas because of the lack of time that you maybe want to revisit. Those typically are nice candidates for adding polish to a game, but on a general sense, it's thinking about how to maybe make your game more unified as a package. So from an art standpoint, it's maybe revisiting some character work that you feel like you kind of rushed through, like taking a look at your environments and characters and see if they actually work as a unified whole. And if not, what can you do to maybe make that gel better? But for most games, I see students do in game jams, I think where polish could be focused is sort of on the game experience or user end side of things. So, working more on controls, working more on actually creating a nice UI, which I think is often the most overlooked part for game jam games, because you want to get it out and working. And for the art side, lighting really is something that people tend to forget. And I think those are great candidates for just typically adding polish on it relatively quickly.
Kate.
Pretty much everything that Ralph said, with the addition of something that is really useful to me when I'm determining what to polish is getting the game in front of people who haven't seen it yet, like playtesting and stuff. Because if you show the game to people, then they are better able to tell you what is missing than you, who have been staring at it for days and days and days. So like they might be able to tell you where the game feels a little weird, or where they would, prefer to have a prompt or some sort of tutorial. And obviously, like a tutorial is less polished and more of a thing that is you would consider, before you get to the polished point. But that's a lot. It's very helpful when it comes to determining what is your final stuff to touch up. Additionally, I would say your ability to polish effectively gets better and better with each game you make. And also, it is one of the situations where I would say playing games is really helpful, because you can see what other games have done and be like, oh, I would really like that. Another place, like Ralph said, UI is definitely one of the things that is left out for game jams generally pretty often, because it ends up being an afterthought for a lot of people. Audio is another place I would definitely say where that is. So if you are playing like, I don't know, some sort of like Candy Crush or something, and you hear you get a nice little particle effect, and you hear a fun audio sound and like a little splash animation whenever you do something, then you can think, hey, that might be fun to put in my game. And draw from other games, draw from past games you've made, and draw from what people are telling you you should improve on.
Awesome. Looks like we lost Mike.
He's back.
Fine, there he is. Right on time. Oh, we still can't hear him though. No.
So tragic.
Oh, Mike.
We had him for the fleetest of moments.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very soft, but
well, let's go ahead and we'll move on to the next question. Let's see. Let's start with Kate with this one.
Oh, boy.
Is there a specific moment in development where you begin polishing, or is it more of an organic process?
Ooh, that's a really great question. So I would say, ideally, I feel like you would, ideally, like, every time as you're making the game, it's like polished on the way. I feel like you should dedicate the amount of time, the appropriate amount of time to each feature as it goes in. But what usually ends up happening for me, and I think what happens for a lot of people, is you end up doing polish after all of the set systems are in. Actually, you should wait until like your game feel is correct and like the core gameplay is done to start polishing. But for me, it usually ends up being like the last thing that happens. Like as you're setting up for a build, and as you're and as you're preparing for release, usually it ends up being kind of a scramble unless you plan better, which I ideally plan better, but it usually happens towards the tail end of production, from what I understand.
Great. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yay! All right. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So I actually teach playtesting. That's one of the classes that I really enjoy teaching, and I think that's kind of an overlooked process or part of the game design process, largely, especially when you're trying to crank a game out so quickly in a game jam. And my focus on game design is on the gameplay experience. And I think polish really starts at capturing that experience and thinking about how you are translating that for your player. And so if you can start assessing your ability to convey that experience early on, that's setting yourself up for success better along the line. And so as you're wrapping up, when I think of polish, I'm thinking about how I can utilize everything to my advantage in these final moments to really amplify this idea of, or this experience that I'm trying to design.
And Ralph?
So it's interesting. The polish is definitely sort of or for most people, it's that last stretch, right? And a lot of people try to really focus on that. But ideally, I think polish you can avoid altogether by really putting in a group effort and making a point to work together as a group. I think a lot of the magic during game development, and quite frankly, any type of digital entertainment development that is team-based, where you have different departments working together, I think the moments of like the eureka moments where someone comes up with a great idea is when you have like interdepartmental work where people work alongside one another, look over each other's shoulder, and you identify these areas where you could actually start polishing things early and maybe avoid the situation that you have to do it towards the butt end of production. That's my answer.
That's great.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let's see. All right, next up. So this is kind of already answered by some of you, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail. What are, in your opinion, what are some of the most important aspects of a game to focus your polish on? Let's start with Mike.
I mean, I will say game experience, but I think usability is something that we really need to focus on as well. If the game is just not playable, then that's sad, and it makes everybody sad. But like even focusing on what information you're giving to the players at different moments will really set your game apart from looking like something that was thrown together in a couple hours, rather than something that was like really thought through well, and making sure that the player is aware of the information that they need to make sense of the game. So that scaffolding or that learning curve, the flow of the game really is something that is continually conveyed throughout the game as they play it.
Great. Ralph.
Pretty much exactly what Mike said. And on top of that, I think it's important that everything gels together nicely, that there's a sense of belonging, right? So oftentimes, especially during game jam games, because there's not a lot of time, there's kind of a disconnect maybe between characters and environments, but making sure that everything's grounded and that everything works and that characters look like they should live in the world that you're playing in really leads to a sense of immersion that I think contributes greatly to the overall experience.
And Kate.
Yeah, as Ralph said, pretty much everything that everyone else has said. Additionally, with when it comes to game jam games, like we already mentioned, UI and audio seem to be places that often fall to the wayside, just as a matter of how people prioritize stuff during game jams. And I would say there's also one of the things that also usually ends up making a game jam game, at the end of the game jam, stand apart from a game jam game that has been polished is the kind of nebulous category of juice, where little things that you can do for your game that will make it just feel and look better, even though they're fairly small. Like even just like, I don't know, like a little effect on a button as it's pushed, or like a particle effect for like, when you poke an enemy or anything like that. There's tons of little tiny bits of fairly low effort, usually juice that you can add to your game that will just make it feel and look a lot better, even though you've barely changed anything. And I think that's one of the things that can really set apart a game jam game, where even though it doesn't take that much time, it's still, more time than you have usually for a game jam. It can set that apart from, something that has a little bit more time put into it.
Awesome. Alrighty. Let's see. Next question. So with a game jam being, much shorter than a normal, game development cycle, how does that kind of affect the polishing pass, and how should our participants kind of balance their time wisely to make sure that they have time to do that? Why don't we start with Kate?
Oh boy. Well, so here's what I would say one of the biggest differences when it comes to polishing a game jam game is that because it's a game jam, everything is condensed into such a small time frame. You do everything at hyper speed. Sometimes the assets you make, the code you make, maybe isn't quite as high quality as it would be if you had spent say a couple of days on it. So from strictly a coding perspective, usually you're just slapping together stuff so that it works, because your goal is to have a functional thing. And sometimes when you're going back later, whether it's at the end of the game jam or like a week after the game jam, you can go back and you can be like, man, what was I in fact thinking here? And so that's something that you really have to consider. And honestly, really the only remedy for that sort of thing, I would say, is if you get the chance, like while you're doing your game jam, maybe try to write a couple of comments in your code, maybe pull up like a little note on Notepad as you're doing art or something like that to remind yourself, okay, this is how I did this. This is why I did this. So if I go back and tweak it later, then I won't break it. And like, what is worth like getting into the weeds of this model with terrible topology, or this, this code that is a huge nightmare. What's worth getting into and fixing, and what's worth leaving out? You have to make that decision.
Great. Ralph?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. I mean, when you're working on a game jam game, you're constantly triaging things, right? And you get to the most urgent patient first. So it is a matter of kind of keeping track of patients you couldn't get to, and then maybe actually having them in order, or order them in sense of importance, and setting aside time for that towards the end of your game jam, and then kind of revisit them. Yeah.
Great. Mike.
I know we might be a little late in this process to mention this idea, but the MVP, the minimum viable product, is something that you should plan to work toward. And that's like, what is absolutely crucial or necessary for me to implement into this game so that it is a viable product on its own. And then anything beyond that, you can label as a stretch goal. And so if you hit that MVP, then you can start thinking beyond that. But having that at least sets you up for like the baseline necessary of what you need to do for this jam. And so that then becomes what you're working toward. At this level, I think it is really a matter of like thinking about what is absolutely necessary to get working, not just working, but working well in the game. And then like maybe thinking about, like Kate said, some of that juice to add in at this point. And like Kate said earlier, this can be something that you pick up later on down the line and polish it further so that it's like a beautiful portfolio piece that you have made. Even like you are working under a very short development cycle, and so it's a lovely way to think about maybe an idea that didn't even come to fruition in this time period, but it's still an idea that you could pick up later. So even if the game that you make at the end of the thing isn't what you had envisioned, don't lose hope on it.
Great, that's awesome. Let's see, next up. Do you think there's such a thing as over-polishing a game? Let's start with Ralph.
I think over-polishing exists the moment you spend more time on polish than things that actually contribute to the game in a meaningful way.
Sure.
I think as long as there's a balance between the two, then there's not necessarily an issue. But I think it's important to get the priorities correct. So primary focus should really be on the user's overall experience. And if you keep that mindset, then I don't think you should be fearful of over-polishing, because you'll probably run out of time. There's plenty to do on that side of the spectrum. Yeah.
Great. Kate.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say, especially when it comes to games made at game jams or student games, I think I have maybe literally never seen a game that has been over polished, just by nature of people like don't have as much experience as they would later, or just don't have enough time. So I would say that's definitely, if you're going into a project worrying, am I over polishing this? You're probably not, if you're a student But if you are worried about that, then like Ralph said, make sure that you focus on the usability and how the game feels and plays first, and then move on to polish.
Mike.
So this is a point where I like to talk about heuristics and like satisficing versus optimizing, where you were just checking off those tick marks. So you like this works well with the MVP model as well, where if you've hit the thing, move on. As soon as it works, as soon as it's functional, as soon as it makes sense in this larger world, like we've touched on already, go on to the next thing. It doesn't matter if you need to keep like tweaking things so they move back and forth. At that point, you're just kind of sitting around wasting time when you could be working on other things. There's plenty to do, like Ralph said.
Awesome. Alrighty. So next up, last question from me before Kate shows us off some of her games. Last one, pretty general, pretty simple one. Do you have any other tips or pointers for our participants as they finish up the game jam? We'll start with Mike on this one. I'll give you a moment to think, I suppose.
Whoa. Yeah, I would say keep an eye on that experience that you're developing. That keep a critical eye there, and work towards really developing that as much as you can in these final moments. Make sure that as you're wrapping up, if you're adding in features, make sure that you already have a build ready. And that way, if the feature that you add in messes up the game for whatever reason, you still have a build before that. But it's crucial that you now start moving into thinking about, if you haven't already, version control.
Awesome. Excuse me. Kate.
Yeah, so I would say two things. First thing small, don't forget to put in like a main menu and like a way to escape, because that will just give you a huge quality of life boost, and that's something that I consistently see in, I think, literally every single game jam I have participated in and organized. There is always people scrambling at the end to be like, oh god, the menu, like now we're gonna have to Alt F4. But and the second thing would be, do not be afraid to scope down on your ideas. Like, do not be afraid to, if it looks like there's going to be a feature that's either going to be like half baked or just not going to work at all, don't be afraid to chop that so that you can have a smaller, more polished experience. Smaller and better is better than bigger and half dreamed. So don't be afraid to do that. There's nothing wrong with realizing that you've bitten off more than you can chew. It happens to everyone.
Awesome. And Ralph, rounding us out.
Yeah, I would say if you're not already, get excited and stay excited. It's no small feat producing a game in a very short amount of time, and getting excited as a team about it in the home stretch really makes a huge difference. And the second thing I wanted to say is think beyond the game jam. Just having this experience together and having gone through that production cycle has taught you a lot, and your next project is going to be that much better because of it. So keep that creation or that sense of creation and creativity going, and yeah, keep it up.
That's awesome. Alrighty, well that rounds out my questions. Next up, Kate, you had a game jam game to show us.
I do have a game jam game to show. I am going to load it up right now. My computer every once in a while is a slow boy, so apologies if we end up with any lag or slowness. It happens. Let's see. I'm gonna try and share my screen. Okay, I believe I have done it. Hopefully you're seeing a very blurry thing around. We actually remembered to have a menu in this one, which is wild. So heck yeah. So some context for this. This was made for a 48-hour game jam. So we started on a Friday, and we ended on a Sunday evening. So this was made with a team of 3 people. It was myself, a designer, and a programmer. I was an artist in this situation. There's also like some miscellaneous audio, but I don't know if you can hear that. And in any case, this riveting gameplay is the more important part. So I'm trying to remember what the prompt was. We liked to do prompts at the time. This was actually for a game jam I organized, so I was both like running it and also, you know, like participating in it. And so I believe the prompt was like there was like some sort of bot online that would generate there was a bot online that would generate strange, like cryptic sentences for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the one for this one was like a snail delivers mail while on fire. It was something along those lines because the game is called Snail Mail, and I genuinely can't think of a single reason besides that it would be called that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do have to give it up to our programmer on this one, Vince. Absolute wizard with Unity. This was made in Unity. Absolute wizard. He got like all this bone stuff working, and as you can tell, it's a little bit janky. But like honestly, the fact that he got the snail working as well as he did is astonishing. So full credit here. So this is kind of I don't know what I would call this. I think at the time we jokingly called it a Metroidvania. As you can see, I'm trying really hard here. I'm gonna probably have to like pop off. Here we go. I'm falling very slowly. You can see that the trail's kind of weird and that it exists in the air. There's like what I wanted to show about this one is because this one has a lot of elements of polish, but you can also tell that not all of the like user experience is fully done. As you can see, some like sometimes the game gets a little bit janky and it's kind of hard to move around. You can see like the shell wiggling a bit. You can see like there's Vince did a very clever thing where he's narrowed the field of view so you can see that everything's a lot smaller, or not smaller, a lot blurrier, which gives you the impression that it's smaller, but also hides the fact that our tree models are just big hexagons with the same bark texture slapped on them not very well. And the fact that we just have like a random Unity train down there with some trees and a skybox that is a little bit janky because I slapped it together and it was, I think, my first time ever making a skybox. I'm about to hit a checkpoint. The controls are definitely a little bit weird. Definitely something that if we were to ever release this would be something to polish. Because we're working with bones, which as most people who have ever worked with like bones or any kind of like weird ragdoll thing can tell you is sometimes a bit of a nightmare. And the fact that Vince did it in 48 hours, like absolutely astonishing. Because we're working with bones, you'll get these weird things where like, I don't know, like stuff will twist around and clip and it'll feel a little bit weird. So that would definitely be something to polish.
What was that thing there was something flying around in the bottom left, I saw it.
Oh yeah. Here, let's see. So that's a
there
crow.
it is.
It's like they're around here somewhere. If you touch a crow, you die instantly. There are checkpoints, but man, does it get rough later.
So is the goal just to climb as high up as you can, basically?
Yes. See, that's another good point, is that we like pretty much, I believe, almost every game jam game. We did not tutorialize this at all. And also like it's very unclear at points what you're supposed to do. I was playing through this earlier, like to make sure it still worked, and I was like, man, like so that's what I'm supposed to do. So oh boy, I'm on the ice. You cannot climb on the ice. Fun fact. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get on this side wall here. Your first goal is to like go touch a flaming mushroom so you can melt ice, and then you have to climb all the way to the top and defeat the ultimate crow. And I sure am. I've done it. There we go. Definitely a bit janky there. There we go. But yeah, there's like no tutorialization or anything at all because we didn't have time.
Awesome. Well, this is great, Kate. This is very, very cool.
Thank you.
Let's see. Francis, should we move on to chat questions? Francis is our tech guy behind the scenes for everyone in chat. You won't be able to hear him, but I'm talking to him. Okay. Kate, do you have anything else to show, or can we move on to chat?
I have one more potentially, because
Okay.
this is a 3D game. I don't know how many folks are doing 3D games, because I know that's that's sometimes a little bit daunting for people who are just starting out.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the questions we got for you, Kate, is so you mentioned changing parts to hide imperfections. Is that a good strategy, or should we focus on just fixing those imperfections?
If you can fix the imperfections, you should always fix them, because if you slap a Band-Aid over it, then eventually, if you work on this longer term, it will come back to haunt you. But if this is something that you're just looking to show, like, for now, like, I agree with what Ralph said, where you should, I think it's very important, where you should think outside the scope of the game jam, and also, like what Mike said, where you should consider making this a portfolio piece if you want. But if this is truly just like you want this to look good for the showcase at the end or anything like that, then I would definitely say, little shortcuts, they're your friends. Just take note of them and come back later in case they bite you.
And to add to that real quickly, there's plenty of AAA games that take those shortcuts. I mean, if you look really carefully in big budget titles, there's lots of crazy stuff hidden left and right because the developers took shortcuts. So, yeah.
Totally.
So I'm gonna try share my screen again. Oh wait, hold on, I gotta run it. So this is a 2D game. This one was made, actually, I don't know how long the game jam this game jam is.
This one is a week long. It started on Sunday and it should end Saturday, I believe.
Okay, fun. So let's see, trying to share screen. So this was made for a 2-week long game jam, so sort of more similar in scope potentially. This was just me as well. I just made this by myself. It's called Happy Farm Time. So basically, the concept of this game, it was, I wanted to make something very simple and narrative based. So basically, you go and talk to this farmer, and the farmer will tell you to not go to the left. And you walk around. There's not much here, so very, very small world, because I knew I did not have that much time to do anything more than that. Very simple. I just made like a tile texture, or a bunch of like tile sets, and it's not super pretty, but gets the job done. So if you go right, the way the farmer tells you, because he just wants you to not go left, you get looped all the way back to the beginning. So when you eventually go left, this happens. Now, this actually isn't a fatal error. This is just a goof. I'm faking you out here. Because you'll spawn back here, and he'll be like, "Oh, weird. I've seen you before."
Some Doki Doki Literature Club stuff.
It was very much inspired by Doki Doki Literature Club. Awesome. This was, I think, literally the December after Doki Doki Literature Club.
Oh, awesome.
I wanted to do something like that for myself, and it was like, yeah, weird. We've had this conversation before, and you'll see little imperfections start to happen. There's like a lot of stuff that I would love to fix at some point if I was ever to come back to this. Like, he moves incredibly slowly. Here we go, another one, and then this one, like each error message was, I think, different, because it was like I meant to reference like what part of the game fell apart, and he's like, "Come over here," and then this happens.
Ooh.
Oh gosh,
this poor cow.
Oh, that's nightmare.
And he's all upset, and he'll just keep on pleading to you, "Don't go left, don't go left," but it just keeps happening, and the world gets more and more messed up as you do it. That's generally the gist of the game. I did want to show it because, as you can see, it's very simplistic in a lot of ways because it's just me, and also it is a 2D game, which I would imagine, I could be wrong, but I would imagine most people participating in the game jams would be doing 2D games because through my experience with game jams, most people end up doing that. It's just simpler in a lot of ways. That would be like a whole nother talk on its own. But you can see like he's like a lot more sad now, and he's like. So you just keep on doing it. This poor lad. Don't worry, he'll it all works out for him in the end. But yeah, just wanted to show off this one.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Thank you for showing those, Kate.
Of course. Thanks for letting me share.
Right. Totally. Okay, let's see. We got a couple questions from chat that we can go through. Let's see. So starting with, this is from Sabretooth Whale in chat.
Good name.
Says, it feels like perfection is unattainable. When is enough enough?
I think that is a great question because that exists not just in game jams, but anywhere in the game. Or in any environment, really, whenever you're creating something. So there is no such thing as perfection. Everybody perceives things differently. But at a certain point, especially when you're working on a game, which is a product, something needs to be called done, right? And different games or different forms of media have different deadlines. But whenever your deadline's there, ultimately, that's when something needs to be done. And for all intents and purposes, you should consider it perfect, or as perfect as could be within the given amount of time. So, yeah.
Awesome. Mike or Kate, any other thoughts?
If you want to go first, Mike, but I got a little.
I think, once you've hit the point that it functions, it's conveying I know I've said this a lot, it's conveying the experience or contributing to it. And it looks cohesive, right? I think cohesion is something that you especially need to consider in this case. Cohesion, it functions, experience, you're good. Again, satisfice versus optimize. Depending on the game, just speaking broadly about game design at this point, depending on the game experience that you are going for, be picky about what you're optimizing. And even optimizing is not a path to perfection.
Awesome.
Yeah. Something that I would definitely say, and this comes with making several games and like having stuff that has hard deadlines, is time is one of the best determinations of whether something is done, because your deadlines are coming up regardless of whether or not you're done, depending on the project. Some people will get like more loosey-goosey if they're doing stuff on their own, and they'll potentially just keep on polishing and refining for forever into infinity. But if you are showcasing something in an event, even if you're just showcasing someone for a friend, or if you just set a date in your mind where you're like, I would like this to be done or this part to be done, making sure that you have concrete deadlines, concrete goals, and concrete deliverables is a really good way to gauge both your progress and when enough is enough.
Great. Alrighty. Let's see. Next question. Let's see. Is it okay to polish free assets that we didn't make ourselves?
It depends on the assets. So there are plenty of. I'm sorry to take the lead question without asking.
Go for it.
But this actually comes up a lot in especially IMGD 4500, where students, essentially it's like a 7-week game jam. But you live in times where there are plenty of artists who create assets specifically to mitigate having them to be created from scratch inside of an indie environment. So if assets are free, or even if they're paid for, it depends on the license that you at the time are agreeing to. So if you get assets that are allowed to be altered, and you can customize to be your own as long as you still give credit to them. Then you're more than allowed to. If you do it without the permission of the original owner, it becomes a different story. So yeah, I guess just stay very conscious about which assets you use and make sure you read the fine print. And if it's not there, then reach out to the original creator to see if it's allowed. So there's not one right answer for something like that.
Sure. Okay. Anyone else have any insights? We can move on to the next one.
Pretty much just check the license, make sure. Yeah, that's really all it is to it. And also there's even though this wasn't really the question, there's no shame in using free assets, especially for a game jam game. Like
Absolutely.
Whatever gets the job done quickly. And if you need to make 40 Renaissance paintings, why paint them yourself when you could like get them in like a little asset pack and like opengameart.org or something.
Right.
Can I just add that like we often think of assets as like art assets or like aesthetic assets, but like coding itself is a type of asset too. And if you're getting code off the internet, you should cite the source for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. All right, let's see. Next one. Well, this is interesting. So in a team setting, so our participants that are in groups of people, should we be polishing all together or individually? It's like each person on an individual thing, or everyone working on one thing at once.
Yes.
When it comes to working in a team, whether it's for a game jam or for any kind of project, communication is like the most key and important thing because it will keep you from accidentally stepping on each other's toes when it comes to source control, like Mike mentioned earlier, or even just when it comes to overall vision of the game. You should always be communicating with other people about what you do, but also make sure that make sure that if you are given a task, you don't have to be babysat or whatever. But it's really key to have that balance, but make sure you communicate with people. It's good to communicate with what you should polish and what you should focus your efforts on. Like if a mechanic still needs to be finished and you're like, I don't know, making it so that the enemies bounce up and down a little bit for no reason, even though it looks really nice, probably focus your efforts on the mechanic. But once those expectations have been communicated and once everyone's on the same page and agreed, then you can probably, so long as again you make sure that you don't step on each other's toes with version control or anything like that, then I would say it's fine to polish on your own as well.
Awesome. Great.
I would add to that
Sure.
that I think there's something to be said for the magic that happens once like artists and the technical side of development that implements art kind of really start talking together. So oftentimes you finish an art asset and you hand it over and sure it gets thrown in engine, but it might not look quite the way that you had anticipated it to. Or you feel like the lighting is not necessarily doing it justice as an artist. And I think keeping conversations open and actually really sitting down together from the two different perspectives and trying to address those issues is where a lot of magic can happen. And it might retroactively change the way you approach the art for your game jam as well. It's like all of a sudden you realize those blue lights are not necessarily working, or they are, and that will influence your artistic choices going forward. So finding time to keep those avenues of communication open and allowing for almost a little bit of a sandboxing environment where you can sit together from different sort of levels of expertise and muddle around together with assets inside of a game engine allows for that type of environment, and lots of cool stuff happens that way.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I think one of the temptations with group projects is that we all need to be sitting down and working on the thing at the same time. And that's something that I would actually, I discourage my students from doing that, because what happens is that you get burnt out really quickly without really making much, because everybody feels like they have to have their hands in the pot. When often it's better to delegate tasks and then check in once every so often, and balancing that time that you check in versus when you disperse and distribute tasks is magic. And then when you are holding that like group meeting or that group critique, that's when you have the opportunity of checking in to make sure that the experience is still cohesive, the game is functioning the way that everybody had imagined. But also what you're allowing to do is optimize the communication at that moment so that you don't get frustrated with each other either.
Yeah.
Great. Alrighty, let's see. Next one. If our team does not include an artist, how can we polish visual things well? Any tips?
Great question. So first and foremost, there are, depending on what type of game you're creating, art assets out there in the asset stores, depending on what engine you're working in. And I've seen some really great games come through game jams from just non-artists. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, if you're not an artist, is to keep the art within the game consistent. That's probably more important than anything else. It doesn't all have to be of photographically realistic quality, but as long as there's a level of consistency where everything, again, really feels like it gels well together and there's a sense of belonging, I think that works. So intentionally keeping your aesthetic simple in that sort of situation and making sure you choose art assets that are available to you and easily implemented, then will help you out. But it certainly can be done.
So there's this really great talk called Juice It or Lose It I've pulled it up here. It's by like Martin Jonassen and Petri Purho. I'm sure I've pronounced that wrong. But it's a really good talk about like how to add a lot of like how the concept of juice in a game that is really useful to understand. And it also goes a little bit into adding polish to a game and in the way that like programmers do. Like there's very little stuff that they do there with actual art assets. Most of what they do is hard coded in, and it adds a lot of a lot of it ends up looking very visual, but an artist didn't necessarily have a hand in there. It was just a programmer with an artistic eye. And I think if you're a programmer with an artistic eye, then there's a lot that you can do. Like there's a lot that you can do when it comes to UI, when it comes to game feel, when it comes to even just like a tiny little particle effect that's very basic that you don't need an asset for. You can just tweak the way that the particles come out. There's a lot of little stuff you can do. So long as you keep the look in mind, you can get a nice fusion without having to have anyone make a single art asset.
Yeah, Kate pretty much summed it up nicely. Thinking that polish only applies to the aesthetics of your game is short-sighted. You should also think about how you're polishing the mechanics, the programming. All of that itself needs polishing in the way that you are requiring your game to process the lines of code, basically. So like that might be somewhere where you want to look at like the logic of your code too. But also like Kate said, with the idea of juice or game feel, can you add in like screen shakes or like weird effects that communicate something's happened on the screen that don't require additional or beautiful art assets necessarily, but add this kind of loveliness to the experience or the overall like player engagement with the game.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, it looks like that's the end of our questions. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think what I said earlier really holds up. I hope that all the teams that are currently working on this continue to push it further beyond the game jam, because it's a great experience.
Yeah, hope we're having fun.
Where can we find the games once they're complete? Because I'm actually really curious.
Yeah, that's great.
So we do have. After the stream, I can link you guys to our. We have a Discord server, where we have all our teams, and they've actually been posting a decent amount of progress screenshots, and there's some pretty cool stuff that people are working on. And then through that, we'll be playing and showing off games and stuff like that too.
Excellent.
Alrighty.
Yeah, have fun wrapping up, you all, and even if the game turns out to be what you hadn't realized, like Ralph said earlier, focus on like what you learned from this experience. It's a crucial development cycle anyway that is still a moment that you can learn stuff from. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see.
Learn,
Alrighty.
have fun, make games.
Totally. Alrighty. Well, that concludes our stream for the evening. Thank you guys for coming and talking.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
for
you for
having
having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Francis, for running the stream. Thank you, Andrew, for grabbing questions. Good luck to all the teams in the last couple days of chat. And we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye.